The biggest recruiting weekend of the summer for the Alabama Crimson Tide is right around the corner, as the Crimson Tide will not only host multiple five-star recruits, they will host multiple five-star prospects who they have been working on for more than a year, guys who they have built great relationships with, which is why it is easy to make an argument that the Crimson Tide lead for some of these guys, and that's why a lot of Alabama fans are pumped for this weekend. And we're going to talk about some of those guys who will be in Tuscaloosa. And we also will take a look back at some of the guys who were in Tuscaloosa over the weekend and talk about what they had to say about their official visits and kind of like where Alabama stands with them. They made a move for Georgia Tech commit, strengthening their position with two other defensive prospects. I will talk about that on this episode of The Process. As always, I am Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting and Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama. For those of you who follow Alabama recruiting, I'm going to just update some of the latest things that have happened for the Crimson Tide. In terms of the 2026 recruiting class, of course, they picked up a verbal commitment from four-star quarterback Jet Tamala. He became the Crimson Tide's seventh commit, their only quarterback commit, because they won one quarterback here in this 2026 recruiting class. Be sure to check out our update video on our YouTube channel. The Crimson Tide are also out of the running five-star athlete Brandon Arrington out of California. After he took an official visit to Alabama, he's now down to Texas A&M in Oregon. We'll announce a commitment decision here pretty soon. Really, it was just one of those more interesting ones. Of course, no one considered Alabama to be the favorite for him. They thought maybe this official visit could put Alabama in a better position, but it looks like it did it. The Crimson Tide are out of the running for Brandon Arrington, a five-star athlete. But some guys who they are in the running for and continue to be in the running for, who they had on campus on this weekend. One of those guys is Elijah Golden, a 2026 four-star defensive lineman out of Florida, who's currently considering the Crimson Tide. He basically has a top four. He considers the Crimson Tide to be one of his top schools. Going back to Golden, this is a guy who unofficially visited the Crimson Tide 2 times during the spring. Had a lot of good things to say about Alabama after that visit, of course. But after this official visit, his biggest takeaway was Alabama's coaching staff's emphasis on development. Just saying, in terms of his biggest takeaway, it was just mainly about development, not how you are now, but you in 3 to 4 years. That was Alabama's coaching staff main message to him, and he took that as a big takeaway. His host was Keon Keeley, because a lot of these recruits, they have prospects who were most likely, when they were prospects, players at Alabama who are from their state. Of course, Keeley is from Florida. Huge reason, I'm pretty sure that's why he was Golden's player host on this weekend. But in terms of Keon Keeley, he said his host Keon Keeley was just telling him things that he should do come again, like learning the playbook, doing all the little things right. He said he asked Keeley out some of the other guys, although he's not in Tuscaloosa anymore. He asked particularly about how like a guy like Caleb Downs came in and was able to start as a freshman. Keeley told him he just came in and put his head down and worked. Those were like some of the conversations that Keeley and Golden was having. He said he had a lot of great meetings with Alabama's coaching staff, and he said he just had a good time, and the hospitality in Tuscaloosa was really good. I think the meetings was probably really important for Golden on this weekend. I think that is a major takeaway for him as well, because this is a kid who spoke highly about the Crimson Tide scheme in the past, saying he could fit their scheme because it thrives and is built off of versatile defensive lineman, and that's kind of like what Golden is. He's a guy who possibly could play all the different positions across the Crimson Tide's defensive front, from that bandit role to that nose tackle position to that defensive tackle position as well. When it comes to the Crimson Tide's 4-2-5 scheme under Kane Womack, I think the Crimson Tide improved their position with Golden, but we will see how things continue to move forward with the four-star defensive lineman, who said he wants to announce a commitment before his senior season, kind of looking at August. I wouldn't count on July for a guy like him, and I think he's part of that rotation of where we feel like the Crimson Tide could have a huge surge for the rest of this month and next month. Golden could be a part of that, so we'll keep our eyes on the four-star defensive lineman Jaden Terry, a guy who we talked about briefly on the last episode of The Process. Four-star defensive back, verbally committed to Georgia Tech. Actually, he was on campus this weekend for an official visit, which was quite interesting because that's when he picked up his verbal offer from the Tide. Most guys who get on campus for an official visit had that offer for sometimes more than a year or so, at least, But Jaden Terry, it was really interesting that he was on campus for that official visit, and that's when he got his verbal offer from Alabama. Like I said, verbally committed to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets at the moment, but he walked away feeling really good about the Crimson Tide's brotherhood, saying, I would definitely say the brotherhood was the biggest takeaway. When I met with all the players, it's like we instantly had a bond. In terms of what his overall thoughts are about the Alabama football program, he told me he feels it is a very good program. It is a program he grew up watching. It was always his dream school, and now to get a chance to play there is like a dream come true. The coaches are real and care about developing players as athletes and as people. I kind of heard that a lot from a lot of different guys who I spoke to over the weekend who really walked away from their official visit saying that they feel the Crimson Tide's coaching staff is really putting an emphasis on player development. So that's something that stood out to Terry, who is a 6'3" defensive back, projected to be a cornerback at the next level. The Crimson Tide continue to go after these long, lengthy, athletic cornerbacks. It's no secret the type of defensive backs who Maurice Linguist wants inside of his secondary. But when you take a look at Terry, like I said, 6'3" defensive back, great length. The length a lot of college coaches are in hot pursuit of at that cornerback position. He does a good job of breaking on the football and coverage and really using that length to his advantage in coverage. I think when the guys have that length, I think that really allows them to recover at a good pace, in my opinion. Guys who with that type of length can recover if they are out of position by a step or two. I think that's one of the biggest things I see in terms of those guys having those long arms, when they also are able to stick those long arms in there and put their arms in between the wide receivers' hands and make plays on the football as well. So play through the hands, as coaches and those who analysts like to call it when you're breaking down guys' games. So Jaden Terry brings that to the table. In my opinion, I think the Crimson Tide have put themselves in a position to be in a driver's seat to flip Terry if he was to decommit or choose to move away from his commitment to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. So that's something we'll keep our eyes on. But right now, Alabama is moving to the favorite seat to land Terry if he was to decommit from the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. The Crimson Tide also had Nick Abrams on campus, a 2026 four-star linebacker out of Maryland who's currently considering Alabama, Michigan, Oregon, just among his top schools at the moment as he continues to work through his recruitment. Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, and Oregon are his finalists at the moment. In terms of what he thought about Alabama's coaching staff, he really walked away feeling good about Alabama's defensive scheme, saying he feels the foundation Alabama has is the best he's ever seen. Their scheme is also built for linebackers. The production they produce is crazy and something that jumps off the screen. In just terms of the overall official visit, he said it was great. He had an amazing time. I think Alabama's coaching staff was really able to tell Abrams that on the defensive side of football, they want their linebackers to make plays and be highly productive. When you take a look at Alabama's 2024 stat sheet in terms of total tackles and all of those different things, three of the top four leading tackles are linebackers in Jahad Campbell, Deontay Lawson, and Justin Jefferson. So the Crimson Tide want their linebackers to be very active like a guy like Nick Abrams can be, in terms of him being that athletic linebacker, very long, a guy who can play sideline to sideline, is able to extend when he's playing in open space. Like I said, he's a guy who has that frame and has that athletic ability that a lot of schools are going to go after at that linebacker position, the way he's able to flow all over the field, be athletic, play in space really well, excel at playing in space and being able to close on the football really well. So those are just some of the factors that led Alabama to go after Abrams in the first place. And I think Alabama has strengthened their position with him after this official visit. We'll kind of like see how things continue to play out with him. I think he's a guy to watch who has a July decision coming up. Like I said, I think that for the rest of this month and throughout July, I think the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to really make a statement when it comes to their 2026 recruiting class. And they are going to be hoping to make a statement on July 2nd, a major statement, when five-star wide receiver Sadarius Morgan gets to Tuscaloosa. He's a five-star wideout, like I said, and he's a special talent out of Benjamin Russell High School in Alexander City, Alabama. Grew up inside the state, of course. Grew up an Alabama fan. Multiple members of his family are Alabama fans. And the minute he got the offer, he went back to that, saying how special this offer was because a lot of his family members grew up fans of the Crimson Tide. So him as well, he grew up an Alabama fan as well. So whenever you look at an in-state kid, grew up an Alabama fan, most of his family members are Alabama fans as well, and he's a special talent. Those are can't miss kids. That's kind of is like what Sadarius Morgan is considered at this particular point in time. We had an opportunity to see him this spring. It's kind of like the film that you guys are watching right now. A lot of original film on this episode of The Process, shot by us here at Touchdown Alabama. You take a look at Sadarius Morgan, a guy who's 6'4", possibly 6'5". That's kind of like where he's going to be at probably when he enroll into the school of his choice. Probably one of the more sure-handed wide receivers I ever covered at that particular practice. He did not drop a single pass. When you take a look at his film, it seems as if he's one of those wide receivers your quarterback can just trust. Start of all to Sadarius. He's going to be able to fight and to get to the football. I think he's very competitive when the ball is in the air. I think he's one of those guys, no matter who's on him, he think the football is his and he think it belongs to him. He wants to get it in his possession. In terms of his catch radius, it's probably the thing that jumps out to me the most is his catch radius in his dependable hands. Really strong hands, and they're very dependable by just what I've seen from him on film. But not only on film, I saw him at the Future 50, which is the video that you guys are seeing when he's in that green Under Armour shirt. Also saw him at that practice, and I've seen him at 7-on-7 events in the past as well with Benjamin Russell. So there's a lot to like about Morgan. But while a lot of people consider the Crimson Tide to be in a really good position with him, it's the fact, like I said, he grew up an Alabama fan. Alabama's wide receiver coach, Jamarcus Shepard, has done a great job building a relationship with him. Alabama is perceived to be in the driver's seat for Morgan at the moment. This official visit is where Alabama can make a statement, but they can close the door on anybody in Morgan's recruitment. I think heading into his list of official visits when he had that top 6, we did an interview with him. You guys check that out on our YouTube channel. I think at that particular point in time, Alabama was in the driver's seat, of course, but we're looking at schools like possibly Auburn because his teammates, former high school teammate at Benjamin Russell High School in Malcolm Simmons, plays wide receiver at Auburn at the moment, and he is also has a great relationship with just some of the wide receivers in Auburn's wide receiver room because a lot of those guys are on the younger side, guys who he's competed with inside the state of Alabama for years. But also taking a look at a school like Colorado, you thought maybe if he gets to Colorado and gets a chance to bond with Deion and bond with the Buffs, maybe they could stand out. He had a really great visit to Colorado, but I think the thing that kind of hurt Colorado, in my opinion, is the fact that he didn't get a chance to talk to Deion while he was on campus, just based on reports and our interview with him after that Colorado official visit. So I think that was really interesting in my mind, in my opinion. I think if he got a chance to talk to Deion and spend some time around Deion, I thought the Colorado Buffs probably could have made a bigger push, but they did make a significant push, I would say, for him during that particular visit. It is no secret all eyes will be on Sadarius on this weekend, and as the Crimson Tide look to position themselves in a really good position with him before this dead period begins. And he announced a commitment on July 2nd between the Crimson Tide, Auburn, Clemson, Florida, Georgia, some of the schools he's considering ahead of that decision. Another 5-star recruit from the state of Alabama who will be in Tuscaloosa on the campus of the University of Alabama this weekend is Xavier Crowwell, EJ Crowwell, or some of you guys may know him as. He's a 5-star running back, explosive, just a full package at running back, 200 pounds, runs like a 200-pound running back, great pad height in terms of when he's carrying the football in the hole, a guy who can lower his shoulder, great balance, good speed for a 200-pound back, a guy who can run a sub-11 100-meter dash. That's good speed no matter how big you are, and it's even more impressive if you're a 200-pound back, a guy who doesn't let arm tackles get him down. Of course, physical running back. We've talked about it traits over and over again, kind of like what makes him special, can catch the football out of the backfield as well. But the Crimson Tide are the leader, no doubt, in my mind, for Crowwell, just based on, of course, he talks about growing up Alabama fan, respecting the program, and growing up watching Alabama dominate, knowing all of these different things, which kind of like put Alabama at the forefront anyway. But the amount of times he's been to Tuscaloosa, it's kind of like why a lot of people are so confident when it comes to Alabama and Crowwell is the fact that he's been to Tuscaloosa so many different times under this new coaching style, which is really impressive. He was on pace as a 2027 prospect before he reclassified to the 2026 class to outpace a lot of guys in that 2026 class who are already in it. And in terms of how many times they have visited Alabama. So right, the moment he reclassified the Crimson Tide, I think got into an even better position. And it was a time where Crowwell was actually thinking about committing during the later periods of this recruiting cycle, which in my mind, I felt like when he first told me that, I said, okay, that gives other teams an opportunity to close the gap. with Alabama, and just based on how long it would take for him to make a decision, looking at like a December, which would be several months from now of him taking these official visits. I was like, yo, that opens the door for some schools to make a ground. But when he pushed up his commitment date, I was like, okay, that really closed the door. I think that closes the door of opportunity for a lot of different schools for him to continue to build a relationship with them, get him on campus, and all these different things. So I feel Alabama is right in full control of the driver's seat. I feel more confident in Crowwell than Morgan, at least at this point in my opinion, just based on what I've gathered from interviews with them in the past and just looking at their recruitment, just from a up top type of point of view and POV. So that's kind of like how I would take a look at Crowwell. I think Alabama is right in that driver's seat. They got an opportunity, I feel, to put the nail in the coffin, for so to speak, for Crowwell on this weekend. Going to stay on the offensive side of the football and talk about another guy who recently got an offer from the Crimson Tide, and Owen Cabel, a 3-star wide receiver out of Tennessee, 6'3", wide out. A guy who, when you take a look at his film and just some of the things that kind of like stand out to me about Cabel is that he's a decent route runner in terms of him being 6'3", a wide receiver. Went and camped in Tuscaloosa, wowed Alabama's coaching staff, and that's why they extended the offer to him. Ran a 4.4 40-yard dash while he was in Tuscaloosa. So this is a guy with the explosive speed that you can measure. It's measurable, and you can see that he's a guy who lets that transitions over to the football field with him having that proven speed in a 40-yard dash, but also as a track runner because he has a PR of 10.76 in the 100 meter dash. His speed allows him to accelerate, create separation from defenders after the catch. He's also effective at getting behind the defense and stretching the field. When you take a look at his film, so Cabel is a guy who the Crimson Tide are currently recruiting here in his 2026 recruiting class, who they recently offered getting him on campus for this official visit. I think the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to jump into the driver's seat for the explosive wide out. Another guy who I think the Crimson Tide have a great position to get into a really solid position for and just really take over his recruitment is Zay Hall, a not only an in-state product but a hometown product out of here, Tuscaloosa High School in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Clocked in a 4.5 40-yard dash while camping in Tuscaloosa a couple of weeks ago. He's a guy who the Crimson Tide really like at that linebacker position. When I take a look at his film, his ability to sift through traffic and get to the football really stands out to me. Also, the angle that he takes to the football when he's playing sideline to sideline, you can tell that he's under control, flows smoothly. That play right there is a great example of him taking a great angle and playing sideline to sideline and letting that ball carrier get up the football field. Had an opportunity to talk with him after he got that offer from the Crimson Tide. He said that this offer will have a big impact on his recruitment in terms of how he feel about Alabama, saying this offer means a lot. I think Alabama is one of the best programs ever. It's nothing that they are lacking. So I think Alabama on this weekend, during this official visit, I think they have an opportunity to jump right into the front of Zay Hall's recruitment. I will keep a very close eye on Hall. Another linebacker who will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend is 5-star linebacker Anthony Jones out of St. Paul's Episcopal School in Mobile, Alabama. I've been covering Jones for, I would say, probably 3 years now. Covered him before he got the Alabama offer when he had like South Alabama, some of the smaller offers. But this film is actually like when he's like I want to say he was a 10th sophomore. I want to say he was a sophomore, and look at the size of this kid. This kid is like he was built in a lab in terms of him being a 5-star linebacker. He's listed as a linebacker or an edge, depending on what recruiting site you take a look at and kind of like what people consider him to be. The Crimson Tide like him at that wolf linebacker position, which is an outside linebacker, and that 4-2-5 swarm defense working under Christian Robinson, the Crimson Tide's outside linebacker coach. I really like Jones when he's playing along the defensive front. He's a guy who's really versatile, probably more versatile than most people realize, because he plays in the interior at defensive tackle at times for St. Paul's Episcopal School. I think that's kind of like where his future is in terms of him putting his hand in the ground, rushing from the edge and being disruptive up front. I think he's just a different type of player when he's playing that type of role. So kind of like that Will Anderson type of role, you can say, where you will see probably his hand in the ground a little bit more than you can see him playing off the ball. Can play sideline to sideline, but I think he's a guy who's going to really excel when he's able to get after the quarterback and also get after ball carriers when they're running the football, playing along the defensive front. Anthony Davis will also be in Tuscaloosa, a 4-star linebacker out of Grayson High School in Georgia, an athletic linebacker who we had an opportunity to see at the Under Armour event in Atlanta, Georgia, several months ago. He's one of those linebackers who kind of fit into the same mold of Abrams, who's going to play off the ball, athletic linebacker who can excel at dropping coverage and not look out of place, which we saw at that particular camp. Really looked really good playing in coverage for a linebacker, being able to change direction and being able to hold running backs at this particular camp, because they're going up against running backs, and that could be really difficult, specifically in that environment. And Anthony Davis really held his own. I think the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to really improve their position with Davis, because this is a guy who Alabama didn't offer, although they were in contact with them. They were getting him on campus, but it took a minute before they extended an offer to Davis. But he does have that offer on the table, getting him on campus for an official visit, which means he is what some people like to call a take for the Crimson Tide, and they'll look to improve and get into a good position with Davis on this weekend. Multiple other prospects will be in Tuscaloosa, so be sure to check them out over on our YouTube channel, and also check out the 2027 recruits who recently got offers from the Crimson Tide. Get updates on them over on our site, touchdownalabama.com. Of course, as always, I am Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting and Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining.